In its 95-year history, only 6 Asians have earned acting Oscars. The first Asian to win an Emmy was not until 2016. Historically, Hollywood offered Asians few opportunities in front or behind the cameras and featured white actors in yellowface to portray Asian characters. When Asian actors actually portrayed Asian characters, they were usually stereotypical and demeaning caricatures. Today, we are joined by 3 accomplished Asian women in film, Shirley Sung, Felicia Lowe, and Robin Leung, to explore their unsung stories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or AAPI, in film over the years. This is the 7th installment of USET's Asian American Trailblazer series, which we launched in 2021 as a response to rising anti-Asian hate. This series gives voice to the contribution of Asians to the fabric of American life and celebrates the achievements of trailblazing AAPI women. We will hear from our trailblazers in film today to learn their personal journeys and struggles, as well as triumphs, in achieving successful careers. My old friend, Shirley Sung, will moderate today's program. She is a consummate film director, producer, and writer, a pioneering advocate for AAPIs in film. She and I have traveled across China under the auspices of USET, showing Chinese audiences her films, which draw on her East-West bicultural heritage. Her films broke down cultural differences and resonated with the Chinese just as they resonated with me. I commend her bio, which is in the program announcement to you, because I have time just to mention one of her films, A Great Wall, the film that Shirley produced and co-wrote, and the first American feature co-production shot in the People's Republic of China. I saw it first in 1986 when it came out. I loved it. It was the first American film in which I saw Chinese actors portraying real Chinese people. I could see myself and my family in the film. And you will see a clip of The Great Wall later. But now we have the privilege of seeing Shirley's artistry in an original video montage she created just for this webinar, showcasing the history of AAPI contributions to Hollywood, which so few people know about. Shirley, it's all yours.
Greetings. Hello. I don't see it here. Hi.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hello, greetings. Until very recently, most people have not heard of some of the very early Chinese American filmmakers who were innovators and made crucial, critical contributions to the early American film industries ever since the silent era. And so I made a very short 3-minute montage to show you the arc of some of these people. And my regret is not being able to include more people. So we'll take a quick look, and if you have questions later, you can write it down and send it in. Hope you enjoy it. Let's see the clip.
Her Majesty's scaffold.
Well, it would be worth it, a big ape. There never was an island. All right, go ahead and say it. Never mind, I'll say it for you. The biggest chump north of New Guinea.
You are not a chump. You are an American lady.
Li Ling Ai was determined to show the world China's suffering under the Japanese. She hired photographer Ray Scott, and together they created a daring documentary in living color, Kukan.
For all the little boys and girls who look like me watching tonight, this is a beacon of hope and possibilities. This is proof that dreams dream big and dreams do come true. And ladies, don't let anybody tell you you are ever past your prime. Never give up.
Wow. So the message that Michelle Yeoh said during her acceptance of the Oscar is really something that we can all identify with. Yes, ladies never give up. And we have two ladies that didn't give up and never gave up, and that's how they achieved their films. In terms of the people that you saw in the clip, maybe you've seen more of the movies, but you did not necessarily remember their creators. James Won Howe is one of the leading, outstanding, superb cinematographers in all of the US or all over the world. He's a first, one of the earliest innovators of lighting and the art of lighting and being a poem, a visual poem with his films, and also a poet with his lighting. He was chosen despite being a very small man, short, and he was turned away a couple of times because of his small physique. They thought that he wouldn't be able to carry all the heavy cameras in those days. He started in the early eras. And then he very quickly really learned on his own. He had no former education, but he started from the bottom and learned on the job until he achieved all these major films. And I have a very special memory, unforgettable, that as a student I wrote to him, and he invited me to LA. So I took the Greyhound bus, and he took me around the city. And then later on, I invited him back when I was at the Chinese Culture Center, and he loved to see pictures of early the motion pictures made in China, which we showed in San Francisco. Anyway, so that was my relationship with James Wan Hao. And we talked about making films in China someday. And unfortunately, that did not happen as he passed away in the 70s. The other person, of course, was Anna May Wong. And she was a really tragic story because she wasn't able to play the Chinese role that she really wanted in The Good Earth. Some people say in the studio say she's not Chinese enough, or she's too Chinese. So with all that disappointment later as she aged, she was relegated to playing maids with artificial Chinese accents. She's actually a fluent English speaker. So anyway, she left the country, left the US, tried to make films in Europe, and then during the Civil War in China, she tried to go back. She did go back and to try to help, but she was rejected by and criticized by Madame Chiang Kai-shek because she was known to play dragon ladies and other demeaning stereotypes of the Chinese. So here she was, left US that didn't want to accept her, and then she had to leave China because China didn't accept her. So this is her tragedy, and she felt very sad and died an early death in her 50s. And then there was all these other very talented filmmakers, editor Richard Chu, and then of course the Bruce Lee, who again died an early death. And unfortunately, recently in the film that is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they made fun of a character that they were portraying as Bruce Lee. So even today, there were these gratuitous criticism of Chinese or making fun of them. I can go on and on, but we have some very special filmmakers. And the next person I'd like you to meet is a very special filmmaker who I've admired for a long time for her dedication to the Chinese American community and for her search for her own roots. And she, which is like an odyssey of finding out where her family came from, and she traced them. So let us meet Felicia Lowe. Hi.
Thank you so much. Hi, Shirley. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be a part of this conversation. It was, I think, 1974, I came to film via broadcast news reporting. And at that time, I was one of the first in San Francisco to be the first female reporter. And now it seems like a funny thing because 50 years now, it's almost another stereotype of the female Asian reporter. But what I loved about film is that you can reach a lot of people, and it's a very dynamic medium. And what I realized also from film, my broadcast training, is that I wanted to tell longer, deeper stories that had a longer shelf life than ordinary news. Also, what had been bugging me from the time I was very young, when my mother would say to me, if anybody asks where I come from, say Hawaii. And I'd say, why, Mommy? And, I'd never got an answer. And my aunt said, of course she comes from China. So it made me a very curious child and probably a little confused because I didn't understand why my mother would ask me to lie. So fast forward many years later, and I began to understand that I had a real need to know, and she had a real desire to be quiet and silent about her past. And I guess one of the points we can really acknowledge today is that all of those people you showed in your trailer were people who were the first in their field. And it's always very difficult to be the first. But what it also says is that they are a product of their times. In those 40s, 50s, and 60s, we were just getting a repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which lasted from 1882 till 1943, when Congress passed the first and only law that banned Chinese immigrant laborers from coming to this country. And that colored the perception of who we are as Chinese people, and even internalizing some of what that meant for us. So we were kind of late in the game in terms of our Americanization, if you will. And like I said, 1943 was when the repeal happened. And so when you think about getting into this business and families beginning to be developed in this country, it didn't really start until after the 40s that we see beginning the growth of families. And we'll see another change in 1965 with another Immigration Act. But I'm just making the point that history and the intersection of who we are in various industries definitely meet head on. So what you're going to see now in this very brief clip is my most recent documentary called Chinese Couplets, which was my determination to finally get the answer to why Mom said, say Hawaii. So we can show the clip now.
I really didn't know my mother. She spent most of her life hiding who she was, lying about where she came from, how she got here. This woman who provided me with so much, yet gave me so little. What secrets were so dark that the truth had to be concealed?
Just leave me alone. And where I come from, how did I get to America? It's nobody's business. Okay? I just want to understand that I don't have to open it. It's my private life.
It would take half a century and thousands of miles before I'd find answers to those questions.
Cuba? When did he go to Cuba?
I was at that point 50 years old and had never heard this story.
To me, I have a father. That means I don't have a father.
Why had she kept this secret from me?
I don't know. There's a goddamn saying so long ago. The question you asked me is silly.
Like Chinese couplets, each verse distinct yet related. Together they can tell a story, like mothers and daughters.
Now, Felicia, you know, it seems as if the effort and what your mother was doing and what you were seeking were the opposite directions. As she was hiding her history and how she came to the US. Meanwhile, you're questioning and you're trying to find the answers. So these are two different directions that finally came together. And as you were discovering all the hidden secrets of your family and your mother, how did you feel as you were finding these answers, and how did it become resolved in you?
Well, wouldn't you know it, it was my daughter who cracked my mother's hard shell. And she said, Papa, I have a homework assignment. And she was to find a photograph in the house and get the history of why the photo was taken. And so she picked one of my mother as an infant being held by her mother with her sister standing next to her. And when she asked my mother why the photo was taken, my mother said, oh, it was for my father who left for Cuba before I was born. And I didn't meet him until I was a teenager. And I thought, oh my God, now I'm not gonna rest until I get to the bottom of this story. And that launched me into the making of this film. As most documentary films, especially if you're an independent documentary filmmaker, it takes a number of years to really have an idea to the fruition of the final product. And that, of course, involves not only the research, but also fundraising, which is reality of film. And at that time we did, it was a different time. Now people make films on their cell phones. But at that time, you really needed some hard cash to really pull things together and, of course, go to Cuba and so forth. So, I think that my story really is personal at one level, and then it's a very universal story because I was the first American born in my family. And I had two parents who came here during exclusion as paper sons and paper daughters. By that, I mean that they came on false papers. They bought identities that allowed them to qualify in this very narrow exempt class. So it was in their interest to just keep quiet and not be discovered because there was such a fear that if any of that came out, we could all be deported back to China, no matter what, because America already said we don't want you. So that was what I would understand many years hence, that was the reason why my parents were both very tight-lipped about their past. And of course, when I started in the business, like I said, we needed a basic library of this information about the exclusion laws, about what the process was for them to finally settle. What was that transition when you got off the boat when you got on the boat in China to come to America, then a ferry would meet you when you got to the bay to take you to Angel Island Immigration Station. And then Chinatowns were born as a form of creating a survival cocoon for families, for Chinese people. And then the last one, Chinese couplets, you saw. So I felt that I could bring both my deep interest in it, but also tell a story that really represented the journey for a Chinese immigrant from that era.
Yes, and we hope that we will be able to see that film. There are links in the program at the end where the audience can all see the films how to see the films that we've made. We'll come back to you later and bring Robin, the other filmmaker who did not give up, doesn't give up, to take a look at Robin's trailer as well. So Robin, hello, Robin. You're a lady that doesn't give up, and you have gone on this journey to search for this film that everyone said was gone now and lost. But you have been working in Hawaii, and you are the of fourth generation, I think, and with long ancestry from Hawaii. Will you tell us some of your background?
Yes. Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to USET for allowing me this opportunity to share both my filmmaking and my stories and have discussion with these wonderful female filmmakers. I had to laugh when Felicia said, tell people that you're from, my mom said, tell people you're from Hawaii. I'm laughing because over the years, I've discovered that the Asian American experience in Hawaii is really quite different than those of Asian Americans in the continental United States. And so when I took up filmmaking, I really wanted to tell stories of Hawaii, which I felt were missing in a large part from mainstream media. So that really set me off on a number of different journeys. And I've chosen in my filmmaking to concentrate on the stories of women from Hawaii, at least in my past filmmaking. So this particular story of Finding Kukan, which Shirley graciously included in her 3-minute montage, is about a woman from Hawaii. Her name was Lee Ling Ai. Her family name is Lee. And she was a trailblazing filmmaker, but working behind the scenes on a landmark documentary called Kukan. And I'm so glad that Shirley included people in the montage who work behind the scenes of films, because those people are often not noticed and not remembered well in history, but they do so much to forward stories, especially forward stories from the Asian American community. So anyway, I don't want to say too much more, save some time for discussion. So you could go ahead and play the trailer now.
I remember her sitting in the middle of the living room with her cigarette holder, and she said, "I won the Academy Award for Kukan."
There was a 200-feet picture on the Paramount Theater. A Chinese stretching up to heaven, Kugan, heroic courage under bitter suffering. That was my theme, Kugan.
Oh yeah, he's kind of like an Indiana Jones kind of guy. Just really adventurous and wanting to take on the world.
Kukan is the only documentary that's won an Academy Award for which we have no print.
What I'm trying to find out is if she deserved more credit than she got for the film.
It's unheard of to have a Chinese woman involved in a production at that time.
She didn't say anything about any romantic involvement, but I wouldn't doubt it.
She's an opportunist, there's no doubt about it.
She was fueled by passion and drive to get that story out there.
I want to feel the open wind in my face. I want the chance to play the long shot.
She was involved in a major storytelling of China for the world.
Okay, so I just want to say a couple things more about that film before we get to see Shirley's wonderful trailer from her wonderful film, which I just got a chance to see. But anyway, you know, Felicia mentioned that filmmaking can take a long time, and this particular film, Finding Kukan, took me 8 years from start to finish. And I think I had 2 years of research prior to that. I was searching for a story of a Chinese American woman from Hawaii to tell. And it took me 2 years to discover Lee Ling Ai's story and to discover that she had actually been a filmmaker. But along my journey, you know, 8 years of filmmaking, it was a real struggle sometimes to raise money and to persevere. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of so many friends and family and complete strangers who've become friends since then. And Felicia Lowe is one of those people who was a complete stranger to me, but reached out to me and became a really wonderful mentor. So I think that's another thing that we have to point out about Asian American filmmaking, is that we do have this really strong community of filmmakers who help each other out and part of the trailblazing is to blaze a trail for somebody new. And Felicia did that for me. So I'm really excited to share time with her and talk story a little bit more with her. And I'd love to find out now more about Shirley.
Well, you can take a quick look at the Great Walls trailer. You're ready?
Great Wall is a super deluxe, charming and funny family comedy about the delights of looking for your roots and finding them, says Judith Christ. Sheila Benson of the Los Angeles Times calls Peter Wong's A Great Wall a deftly disarming cross-cultural hit.
What do you do for fun?
I play ping pong.
Oh, no kidding. That's great. That's great. That used to be
It's a comedy of social and cultural collision, says Jay Carr of the Boston Globe. Judy Stone of the San Francisco Chronicle calls it a special treat. A Great Wall, an Orion Classics release.
Well, seeing that again brings back a lot of memories. And there's the 80s, the 1980s was a very special time when China was just beginning to open. It was called the Beijing Spring, where people were just so curious about the West. And we were so lucky to be able to film there, the first co-production between the Chinese film studio and us. We brought about a dozen American filmmakers, but they gave us a crew of 60, and that was quite huge to deal with. And we were able to film under really good conditions. We searched for the location for the house, and we're lucky to find this beautiful Siheyuan, a courtyard, the traditional Beijing house in the hutong and those alleys. And it happened to belong to the most famous Chinese opera singer who had passed away, Mei Langfang, the one and only. And he had this beautiful house, courtyard house. And we were able to take over that house to film in there for the Chinese relatives. And the film was directed by Peter Wong and co-written by us. And he's a very humorous person. So we concentrated on cultural conflicts that are humorous. As you know, the parents' relationship in China, we revere the elders. In the West, we worship the youth, the younger people. So it's the opposite in China. So with the two families, the two relations, this is a point of humorous conflict. The other aspect is the old and new. What is old and what is new, and the concept of privacy. There's no such concept in China. Within a family, the parents, of course, they'll open your mail, they'll do whatever, and you never lock your doors. And that concept was also discussed in the film when there was a letter for the daughter, and the mother had given the letter to her opened, and she says, how come you're opening my mail? And then she was saying, I'm your mother, of course, you know. So there are all these little conflicts, but it's cultural. But the sense of Chinese identity, I think, is mainly cultural, and that's what we're trying to show. It's more cultural, the cultural area than ethnicity that defines Chineseness to most people. So with the we had such a wonderful time in filming it with all the support of the crew and the actors. And then when we came back and showed it, we were attending all the festivals, and we had this marvelous audience reaction. And amazingly, what was unexpected was that whichever ethnic group saw the films, it could be Hispanic, it could be European, or they all identified with the people in the film. And they said, oh, this is, you know, we feel just like this. This would happen to us. So it was a wonderful first film to start out with. Let's just open for your comments. How did you feel about that? I'd love to hear. And then also, please feel free to speak up.
Well, one of the things that I noticed after watching Great Wall is that the story holds up. You know, you're right. It's like even though it's at a particular time about a particular family, it holds up as a universal story. And the other thing that I noticed was that narrative filmmakers are like documentarians, because there are so many wonderful period details about the 80s, you know, like these big, huge computers and the cassette Walkmans, and also these beautiful scenes of Beijing, which has changed so much since the 80s, and that I never was able to visit Beijing until 2015, I think it was. And so, you know, those swarms of bicycle riders and things that you have in your movie, Shirley, no longer are there.
Yes,
so that's what I loved about it.
Yeah, massive.
I think I'd love to talk a little bit about everyone's experience of struggling to convince people that their films were not niche films because they were about Asians, that other people could appreciate those stories.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I went to China in 1979 to do, I was traveling with a group of journalists, and my pitch at the time, I was working for the PBS station in San Francisco, was to tell them, and it was true, that I had an 85-year-old grandmother I'd never met before. And that if I could capture meeting her and that family, because my father was the only one of the 4 siblings who came to America, the rest stayed in China. And so, you know, the funding kind of came together just by fluke 2 days before I actually left. And I didn't even know for sure if I could meet my grandmother, because we were hosted by Xinhua News Agency, and it was a little tighter even then because it had really just opened, you know, in the 70s. So it was by quite good luck that, in fact, they did arrange for me to meet my grandmother, and that I would go into the house that my father grew up in. And on the walls were pictures of myself from infancy to college graduation that my father had been sending all these many years. And I have to say that that was the most moving experiences in my entire life, to think that all I knew was a picture, a black and white picture of a little old lady, that's what it meant to be a grandmother, you know, that she was caring and loving and thinking about me. And I didn't know who she was. And that feeling of family was so strong. And just like Shirley said, everybody who saw that said, I went to Italy and experienced exactly the same thing. You know, you meet family. So I think that one of the powerful things we can do is really just show the universality of our lives. while we may have particular differences, we have so much more in common.
Yes. And now there's so many more opportunities to tell Chinese American or Asian American stories, as people are beginning to understand that as Asian Americans, we have individual stories to tell as well, and that each one is original and different, and each family has their own stories. Robin, you were mentioning before that prior to being filmmaker, you were also in the publishing business, and that in both media, you were telling Asian American stories. And how does that relate with each other?
Well, actually, in the 80s, I worked for Random House. I wasn't an author, but I worked in the publishing division for the vice president of Ballantine Books. But what I see this parallel between book publishing and filmmaking, because at the time, I don't know if the audience members remember this, but there was basically one Asian American novel, Woman Warrior. And that was like, it was like that there were other, now I know there were other people writing, but the publishing world just thought we only need one, and that was the one that everybody was passing around. And then after that, other books started being published that everybody in my family passed around to everybody, but there were very few and far between. And so one of my frustrations, the other thing that happened in the 80s was there was Wayne Wang's film,
Chan is Missing.
Chan is Missing. That was like the one Asian American film that that people could watch. And it's changed so much now, thank goodness. But there was this idea that only Asians would want to read an Asian book, and that I think the same thing crossed over to film. But it's so different now, and I think I can't keep up now with all of the Asian American fiction and nonfiction content in books. And the same thing goes with film. It's really hard for me to keep up with everyone. And I'm not a big fan of social media, but I do feel that has had an influence on how open people are to other people's stories. And also the content producers are seeing, oh, well, other people besides Asians are reading like Celeste Ng's books or Crying in H Mart or all these books that are bestsellers. They're like didn't become bestsellers only because Asians bought them. They're being bought and read by everyone. And I think the same goes with film, everywhere, everything all at once. And Crazy Rich Asians, those films were successful because everyone watched them.
Right.
Well, because Crazy Rich Asians made so much money, it opened a lot of doors too. Like, let's jump on that bandwagon. There obviously are people who want to see that film. So, but I take your point. It's been a slow but steady upward grind in terms of the numbers of films that we're seeing in filmmakers. And now, that was not a field most immigrant parents would say, oh, go be an artist, especially if you're the firstborn, forget it, So, I mentioned before about 1965 and the change in the immigration and naturalization laws, and that opened up immigration again. And those people who came, many of them also brought their experience with Chinese films and Japanese films. And so it really infused in the industry a new openness and mindset and very talented people and their children who were allowed to go to film schools and so forth. So now we have people who are well equipped behind the camera and in front of the camera in every aspect of the industry, you will see names. And even if you look at the list of the Oscar nominations for 2024, 3 of the 5 short documentary producers are of Chinese descent. That's 3 out of 5. And then one of the films, Past Lives, is about a Korean American. So, we are making an imprint, and thank goodness, we're really seeing a growth.
At long last, the progression is now speeding up, we hope. But if you look at the whole arc of this, the history of this, it's taken a century. It's 1922 when Anna May Wong made her silent film, Toll of the Sea. And then following that, whenever she made a film, she cannot kiss the leading man, and the leading men are usually non-Asian. So they would come very close and then cut. And that was when miscegenation laws were still active. That affected James Wong Howe as well. He was married to a Caucasian woman, a writer, and they were not, this was not legal. They had to live together somewhere else or somewhere not so close by. And that has affected filmmaking, affected people's private lives. And now, if you think how long that has taken, but especially now, we are finally being seen as, I guess, regular human beings, not just Chinese are in this hole, and some other nationalities in another hole, and all these different categories. We are permitted to write different types of stories. And at one time during this struggle, there's some kind of conflicting conflicts among ourselves, because there are always different views in fighting against the so-called yellowface from Caucasian groups to play Asian characters. Sometimes we limit ourselves so much to say that only Asians can play Asians. If you limit yourself that way, then the reverse is, can the Asians play non-Asians? We should be able to play any kind of role. Actors should be able to play any kind of role. So we shouldn't be limiting people by race or even by ethnicity. We should be able to allow actors and writers. We can write about any subject we want if we're qualified and if we're talented. We should not be limited to only writing about Asians, or as I notice in journalism, they often choose that ethnic group to report on the other similar ethnic group. And to me, that's not necessary. A journalist, a reporter should be qualified to report on any type of news. You were a journalist, Felicia. What do you think of that?
I think everything has evolved immensely, thank God. Because now, you talked about interracial kissing. I mean, you turn on your TV set, on every ad, you have same-sex kissing, you have interracial kissing, you have everything. And I think what I really do notice about the stories that we're seeing now, and because there is a variety of stories, there was a time when we were kind of on a starvation diet. So there were so few things about us that which put out had carried the burden or weight of saying, this is who we are. So that formulated some of this model minority concept. But if you look at the films today, people can now be as screwed up and messed up as anybody else. They don't have to be one person, And when you think, especially like when you see the series Beef, at first I thought, oh, what despicable people. I wouldn't want to hang out with them. But it turned out to be an incredible series, you know. So I think I just love the freedom and the creativity and the fearlessness of not trying to fit into what other people would like us to or imagine us to be, because we were all these many things. You know, we have many dimensions to who we are as a people. And I think that generally this group, as we call the people of color, are pretty open about that. You know, I don't think that we're as locked in as at one time we were, when we were just coming out of civil rights and coming out of affirmative action programs and, Asian American studies programs. People were tight then because they were trying to grab a piece of our own history in our own words. But now things are relaxed and we've grown because we've done the basics. You know, we've covered the basics, so we're freer to do greater, broader things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Felicia, I love your point about how immigration law has affected our storytelling. You know, that exclusion really affected so much besides just immigration. Affected, you know, how families tell stories to each other. Your mother had hid that story from you for so long. And then the fact that the 65 change in the immigration law, which more people should study about, that there was strong filmmaking going on in all these Asian countries that fueled our own American film industry from there. And I think that's a really interesting point because, I'm just beginning we have a wonderful film festival in Hawaii that showcases filmmaking from all the Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, all these different places. And I've become more familiar with the wonderful filmmaking and filmmakers in those different countries. And so, they don't have the idea, well, we have to if we have a character who's Chinese, they have to be a certain way because their whole country is made up of, Chinese people and all the different varieties. And so their storytelling can be so rich and varied. And I think in a lot of ways, Asian American filmmakers have drawn inspiration from those cross-pollinations, I guess, of
yes. Well,
we're also coming out of that second-class citizen mentality, though. We've asserted ourselves into the fabric of America life so that we don't always have to be afraid to raise our hands. We're able to step forward now, and we've contributed in so many ways that nobody's going to argue that. Although anti-Asian hate shows that it's only maybe skin deep in terms of our total acceptance as, as a race, as an ethnicity.
That's another political, type of trend that affects, has broader
reverberations, and it draws from history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talking about all these areas in the periphery of, traditionally, China considers itself the Middle Kingdom and that everything emanates from the center. But through time, since there's all this emigration coming out and the diaspora of Asians going to all these different countries, and with lively, very active cultural and artistic activities and productions and developments. So we have all these lively productions going on and activities throughout all the peripheries that are now interacting with each other and affecting, actually feeding back to the larger land and the larger continent in Asia. And this is quite a development with the, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, Southeast Asia, and then we in the US is also part of the periphery when you talk about the Asian culture. So we have all this global interaction going on, which can only give us more freedom to create and with more stories to tell. And so with your stories, what are you planning next?
I'm never going to fundraise again, is what I'm planning. I'm not fundraising, but I've really been enjoying these past couple of years of doing very short films. It's funny, I started doing shorts pieces because of news, right? And then I decided I wanted to make films that had a long shelf life. And, you know, thank God they're still showing Carved in Silence, which is about Angel Island Immigration Station, that in schools and libraries, and I recently showed it at a local library. People still don't know about the role of Angel Island Immigration Station in terms of its role in enforcing the Chinese Exclusion Act and the impact that had on our families and those who went through it. And, you know, we keep on having this shiny concept of Ellis Island as the welcoming mat, but, you know, we've always had a very complicated history about immigration, and it's reflective today. So, you know, I'm glad that it's an entry point to talk about the complexities of immigration policies in this country. But I've been doing little shorter pieces for the museum. There was an exhibit on about Chinese Californians from the gold rush to the present day. And these 2-minute videos to try to stop kids in their tracks from a field trip, to grab their attention, to learn something about who we are, who a person is. You know, that to me is very challenging and very enjoyable.
Also, do you feel that the trend, you see, we're going towards shorter and shorter content? It has to do with viewers' attention span too.
Absolutely.
And it's you know, you start with, when I started with film, it's for the giant screen, and that's what really attracted me. And then the screen got smaller and smaller until now it's on your phone. As you were saying, we can make films from the phone. And now it's going to even go down to the postage stamp size, probably.
Well, I won't be able to see it.
Spans gets shorter and shorter. Yeah. And I'm afraid that's kind of the sort of the direction of film also. But the good part is that different media artists today are not just limited to one dimension of film, and we're interacting with installations, music, all kinds of integrated visual arts. And so this is a very, very interesting, complicated period of experimentation with all these different elements. Robin, what do you think?
I think it's an exciting time. I think that people still crave story. At the bottom, it's all about story.
Yes.
And
it's a good story, they'll stay with it, right?
Story, yeah, they'll go for serials. They'll go for series 1, series 2. So whether the story, it's a challenge for story tellers and filmmakers, because we are constantly having to adapt. But in the end, I think that everybody still craves a good story that connects to them, that speaks to them, and that is diverse. One of the nuggets that I learned in one of the workshops I attended, this was about maybe 7 years ago, was that this was from a television writer. She said that television is, because of monetary reasons, was craving diverse stories, because they found out, the history was showing that if a series had only white characters in it, that series would not last more than 1 season. And so television was demanding, because of this monetary pull, more diverse stories. So audiences, I think, are really sophisticated, and their craving for storytelling is really what is going to, drive things. And so I think we can never take our eyes off the audience, as you guys know already, right?
I wonder if our audience has any questions for us.
Oh, yes. It's a good segue, Alicia.
Somebody was going to throw us some of the questions.
Great. Yes, so this question comes from Ziyu Pen, who asks, "Hi, my question is how do you cope with both racial and gender pressure from the movie industry?" It's a heavy question for
Gender pressure.
Racial and gender pressure.
I will say that when I started working, I was working with cranky, old white guys who were cameramen, did not feel like they needed to take any direction from, at that point, a very young Chinese chick is how they would describe me at that time. So I had to learn how to negotiate, figure out how to communicate, and win their trust and respect. And that was one of the most challenging parts of the work, which was to work, you always work. The beauty of what we do is that it's a team effort. So you have to really pull together and learn how to work well with people. But I think that, I'm sure that, people who are going on to large, big sets like Lulu Wang and, Chloe, some of these women who are now doing some big features probably all have to prove themselves in one way or another in terms of how to work with the individuals. By the way, I did want to again compliment Robin about the silhouette shooting that you did in your film, because that was very innovative. And I told you, I've always admired that. I had always wanted to work with this guy. And
how did you do that, Robin?
Oh, well, I worked with a shadow master who studied Balinese shadow theater for 30 years and has moved to he lives in San Francisco, and Felicia knows him, but his name is Larry Reed, and he's adapted a traditional shadow puppet theater style for theatrical purposes. So he's created this really theatrical way of casting shadows with live actors. And when I came across his work, I actually had wanted to use puppets to create some of these visualizations of stories that I only had on pieces of paper. And for a couple film reasons, I chose puppets because I watched Zhang Yimou's To Live, a wonderful film about a shadow puppet person in China. And then another wonderful documentarian, now her name's like escaping me, but she did a documentary using wooden marionettes, and she's an Asian American documentary filmmaker who, shame on me for forgetting it, you know how that goes. But anyways, so I reached out to Larry, and he said, let's collaborate. And so we created these shadow scenes in a big warehouse in Oakland. It was a wonderful one of my favorite experiences in making that film. Yeah. Thank you, Felicia, for that compliment.
I love shadow puppets. And when I was director of the Chinese Culture Center in San Francisco, we had some resident artists, and one was a group of, we had a shadow play group. So we presented performances, and I always love watching the shadow plays as they, told the stories and legends, folk stories. And it was lovely watching your figures, your silhouette figures in your films.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
do we have any other questions?
Another question is for you, Robin. Li Lingai's film Kukan was lost for 70 years. Was it ever found?
Yes, if you're able to watch my full feature, Finding Kukan, you will see that I discovered a copy of that film, and it's a kind of a complicated story, but the initial film reel that I found was badly damaged, but thankfully the cameraman, who actually was the person who won the Oscar, Ray Scott, had digitized, made it on turned the film into a VHS tape before his copy of the movie got too badly damaged. So I did have a VHS tape of it that we had treated as well as we could and transferred to high definition video. And you can see some of that footage in my film. And that I was able to deliver a copy of that to mainland China, to the historians in mainland China. And that was really a profound experience for me because they had never seen in Chongqing, they had never seen color footage from the ground of the bombing of that city during World War II. So it was a very moving experience to be able to show that to those people.
Now, why did you decide to actually go through this long search? Now, how did you hear about Li Ling-ai? Because if she was unknown, how did you hear about her?
Well, Li Ling-ai was one of those people who persevered, and even if people didn't want, publishers were not interested, she wrote a memoir about her own parents who were doctors in Hawaii. They were one of the first doctors of Western medicine in Hawaii, and they had a fabulous life, and she, really interesting, dramatic life. And so she wrote a memoir called Life is for a Long Time that was published by a small publisher, Hastings House. And it had gone out of print, and in my searching for this unknown Chinese woman to feature, I came across her memoir, and in the jacket flap of the author bio, it said Li Ling-ai co-produced an Academy Award-winning documentary called Kukan, and that just set off, the whole search engine in me. And when I found out that no known copy of that film existed, it was like that. I just could not let that sit. It's like, how can this Chinese woman?
Yes.
It was just like too much for me. I just had to find it. And then once I found it, it was, another mission to get it restored and another mission to get it to China.
Now, for the Chinese audiences out there, Kukan is ku gan, meaning bitter struggles. And this is about the Japanese-American occupation in China in the 30s, in the 1930s. This was a time when Americans did not know anything, and Li Ling-ai felt compelled to tell the story of the struggle of the 7-year war with the Japanese before America entered the war. So go take a look at this film.
One other thing I wanted to also trace back to the last question and mention is that even in 2008, when I started working on this project, there was still funding pressure to have the film not be about the Asian woman, to have the film be about the Caucasian man. I got feedback from funders that they would rather see that story. And I made a conscious effort that, that if I didn't tell Li Ling-ai's story, that her story would completely disappear, because the Caucasian man had his Oscar, and, he had his own really compelling story, but history would remember him, but history wouldn't remember Li Ling-ai unless I told her story. So I really had to persevere myself and convince myself that her story was worth telling, and that I should stick with her story.
Now you made history to know that they will hear of Li Ling-ai, thanks to you.
Wonderful.
I have to say that the community has always been a great support. At times where I had to do a fundraising campaign or something, people have stepped up, because, I think they really do understand that our mission is to tell our story. It's about us and our lives, and to allow for some truth-telling about who we are as well-rounded people who have had losses and successes and struggles to get here or to make their way, and again, a universal story.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
the support of the Asian American community was so essential to making my film, and people contributing $20 here, all over the place, convinced me that people wanted to hear this story. So you're absolutely right.
Wonderful. What I'm just trying to get a few more questions in, and we have quite a few questions from the audience. What Chinese American women involved are in the recent streaming show now, Brother's Son? Is that a reputable next generation template for film?
I don't think I'm familiar with that series.
Yeah,
See, I
I've
can't
seen a
keep
few.
up.
Yeah, it's actually trying to distinguish also between Taiwanese Chinese, and it's about a family, and one brother had stayed behind with the father who was part of a gang, and the mother, Michelle Yao, took the younger brother to America, to Los Angeles, and has kept him separated from the gang life. And so I haven't seen the entire series, but it does kind of, the father gets killed, the gang brother comes to LA. I haven't gone too far beyond that, so I can't speak to it. But I guess the whole point of this is, is it true? It's true for that filmmaker. I mean, I think that we have now, each piece does not need to be so precious as it used to be. There can be as many stories and many twists, and some we may not even identify with as Chinese people. So, but I think that that's wonderful that we have that latitude now.
Then is it time for a documentary on Joan Chen?
Be great. It'd be great. She could do it herself even. It's all about funding. And the thing that I think you might notice from our conversation is that whatever you take a project on, you have to have passion to be in it for the long haul. It's not going to happen unless you happen to be well funded or have a lot of money yourself. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to just stay with it, and through thick and thin. When I taught, I would sometimes show my students my file that had my rejection letters of grants I didn't get. I mean, that's part of what you have to have, a stamina and determination to tell the story you feel is that important, that you're willing to go through all of that. Late nights, writing proposals, all of that.
And this is the case not just with small films, even with big major films. The most time spent is in the fundraising and the financing, especially, of course, with independent films. It takes years sometimes to make to get the financing. And then the shooting itself is the shortest. It's counted in the number of days when you shoot, but the fundraising part may take years. Now, even a very super large production like The Last Emperor, it was made and produced first, and then it was turned down by 4 major studios before they found another studio. So this just goes to show how the difficulties are faced by the filmmakers.
By the way, I did remember the documentary filmmaker's name, Jessica Yu, and the documentary protagonist.
Right. Yes. She's been directing a lot of TV series, and also recently directed a feature film for which I cannot remember the name.
Yeah.
We have another question. Does Constance Wu want to make or direct films? Have any of you worked with her? She's from Richmond, Virginia.
I don't know her.
Yeah.
Actually, I reached out to Constance's agent to see if she would be the voice actor, if she would be interested in being the voice actress, rather, for Li Ling Ai. And she responded positively, but then she got busy. But I thought Kelly Hu did a wonderful job. Kelly's also from Hawaii, so she really got that kind of Hawaiian Chinese twang. She got that down.
Yes, and this is, I believe Rose Chen is saying, can you show one of your documentaries at the 2025 China Fest in Richmond, Virginia? If so, can you contact Rose Chen? So we'll get you in touch. Here's a last question from Cindy E. She asks, I recently wrote my family story on my dad, who was a paper son. 7 chapters, less than 50 pages and 90 photos. I received some very nice reviews and would like to share how do I go about it?
I think you can go around, and there's different organizations like 1882 Foundation who have these talk story programs, and I think just make direct contact with the community members who might want to read the book. Or even if it's only 50 pages, you can create a PowerPoint slideshow and give lectures. And I think a lot of people are interested in family histories.
Right. Another thought is, I don't know where you're located, but go to the nearest historical society. And if there is a Chinese historical society near you, they might be interested. And as Robin was saying earlier, you can start small. You can start with a pamphlet, with a publication first to show around and get people interested in it first before starting with a film, because film is usually a large project and needs some funding.
I wasn't clear. Was that the question? Was the question how to publicize the 50 pages, or was the question how to make a film from the 50 pages? Those are 2 separate questions. Because if you want to just publicize the book itself or the booklet, you could do it with social media, you could self-publish, and then you could post it, or, either sell it or just make it available. And local historical societies, there are genealogy groups, there are all sorts of groups now that you can reach out to, and that would reach out to their constituents to share the story. One of the things I think the other 2 would agree is that you have to be clear who your audience is. Who do you want to see this? Who do you want to know about your work? For me, usually it's targeted for our own community. I want to do right by them, but I also want it to reach other people so that they could see we're all the same. So, this is, it affects how you roll something out, right?
Wonderful. And we'll end this webinar with this last quote from this last comment. And the audience member says, "Thank you so much. Great speakers and accomplishments. The panel brought back wonderful memories of the Hawaii International Film Festival when it was first started at the East-West Center. It featured many Asian American filmmakers in the 1980s, including Peter Wong." Thank you so much, Shirley, Felicia, and Robin. You have been inspiring and wonderful, and this has been a very fun talk. And we would not have wanted to celebrate Chinese New Year with anyone else. So thank you so much for showing your wonderful films and for really trailblazing the Asian American contributions in the American film industry. So thank you all. And
yes, I'd like also to thank Felicia and Robin for participating in this. And we hope that our own conversations will continue. It's been a lot of fun working with you both. And we want to thank the USCET for really undertaking this program. I think it's terrific, and I hope you have more.